Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. The WBC president Mauricio Suleiman has confirmed that the Wilder and Fury rematch, the purse bid, has been delayed again. So this is the second time that an extension has been granted to make this fight before it goes to a purse bid. But it doesn't appear from some of the statements that he's made publicly that a new date has been set, but they've got a watching brief on the situation. So I'll quickly get to his quotes, which he's made to boxingscene.com. And then I'll get to a couple of thoughts, because there's a couple of things rattling around that I just think it's not exactly a tidy look, but it's not the end of the world either. But also, at the end of the day, the WBC has kind of put itself in this position. So I just want to sort of quickly expand on that. But we'll get to the story here. So see on screen, boxingscene.com, Wilder Fury 2 purse bid pushed back again, no deadline imposed. So the quotes are, "I'm in direct communication with both parties who have expressed continued goodwill negotiations," President Mauricio Suleiman informed boxingscene.com on Tuesday. And further on in the story, where are we? "I will continue to monitor, progress the negotiations during this week, and will keep the WBC Board of Governors informed in case we need to take any action," assured Suleiman. So the rest of it here, that's pretty much just background information and such. So you may recall that the first purse bid, it was scheduled for February the 5th. They were given, it was just over 2 weeks. I think it was 2.5 weeks. It was about mid-January, given 2.5 weeks to come to a deal. The WBC had ordered that rematch. And in lieu of that, they would deal with Dominic Breazeale, and we've already seen that situation. I'll come to that quickly a bit later on as well, because there seems to be a number of people who think that Breazeale and White is for the mandatory spot to fight Deontay Wilder or Tyson Fury. But that is not the case. They are fighting for an interim title, but I'll come to that shortly. Anyway, so getting back to the matter at hand. So what we have, Wilder Fury, February the 5th purse bid. At the 11th hour, that was cancelled. They were given a further week to continue negotiations, and in the interim, we've been hearing that it's likely going to be May 18th in the United States, likely in New York, or possibly somewhere else like Las Vegas. So it seems to be they're working out the final details for what is a pretty decent and big rematch that a lot of fans want to see. And now we have no deadline. And it makes you wonder, why did the WBC come in and just sort of give the 2 weeks to negotiate, or the 2 weeks and change? Because if you look at the Dominic Breazeale and Dillian Whyte fight, they've actually given 5 weeks. So that purse bid, that's not due until March the 19th. And that sort of deadline, that sort of seems more in line with, you know, a reasonable period to negotiate. And we know that, you know, Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder, their camps, the respective people, were saying the first fight and the second one, it would be easy to make. They've just got to work through some minor details. But these minor details, they can't be so minor as to, you know, take this long. So obviously there's a couple of snags that, you know, that have sort of cropped up that they're still working through. But the WBC has enough confidence to go, okay, we're going to give you a bit more rope here, you know, a bit more leeway, and you can work it all out and we'll see what happens. But the fact that there's no deadline imposed, well, that's not a good sign. But it makes you wonder, should they have imposed a short deadline like they did in the first place? Effectively, what, 2.5 weeks? And the WBC has a habit of kind of putting its foot in its own mouth. It sort of seems to stumble over itself all the time. And as with this Dominic Breazeale and Dillian Whyte situation, that's them cleaning up their own mess. They made Dominic Breazeale the mandatory challenger in somewhat murky circumstances. Deontay Wilder expressed zero interest in fighting him. The WBC rolled over and let Wilder face Tyson Fury. They get the draw, and then the WBC again doesn't uphold the mandatory and allows this direct rematch. So the WBC, one, had sort of created that situation with Breazeale, but also with this sort of untidiness over these purse bids, it set the short amount of time to negotiate, only gave her another week, and now those two deadlines have been passed. And what it reminded me of was the first fight. Remember Frank Warren after the Pianeta fight sort of said words to the effect that it was going to be a week or so and it would be announced. And then the time just kept ticking on. There were a couple of things said, and then all of a sudden it blew out to over a month. So, and that was quite untidy, because as soon as you put a marker in the sand and say, this is what we're going to do, this is what we're going to meet, and then you miss it, you look silly. But now the WBC has done 2 of these. So, you know, I don't doubt that this fight is going to get made, and I don't really think there's probably anything so serious as it to be scrapped or not getting made. I think it's going to be made. But the WBC has kind of set itself up to fail with these artificial deadlines that it's imposed. And for what reason, though? Because it's given 5 weeks to negotiate for this other fight, only gave this one 2 weeks or 2.5 weeks, then tack on this extra week. That's only 3.5 weeks. So it just kind of, you know, it's like these sanctioning bodies. There's never any sort of consistency with these type of things. And you go back to when they ordered it. Did they really need to come out then and do that? Could they have just waited and sort of see where negotiations were getting to? Because even back in January, we were hearing it was going to be April or May. And then the WBC sort of swoops in and says, you know, look, we'll have a purse bid. It'll be 60-40 to Deontay Wilder. We've lifted it to 40% for Tyson Fury out of the goodness of our heart because, you know, he's worth that. And then the teams themselves are under the pump to try and meet that, which they've failed to do twice now. So the WBC makes itself look a bit silly by imposing these deadlines, not enforcing it, and then it makes the teams look a little bit silly because, you know, they've now also missed it after sort of saying it'd be an easy fight to make. I don't think there's really anything too much to see here in terms of problems with the fight, but it just makes me laugh with the WBC, and it did remind me of that situation with Frank Warren sort of saying it'll be a week. This is back in August, and it ended up being early October where it got announced. But in respect of that other issue that I was talking about, Dillian Whyte and Dominic Breazeale, in my previous video, so less than a day ago from the time that this one went up, Dominic Breazeale ordered to face Dillian Whyte, and it looks like that fight will be in April 20, perhaps, at the O2 in London. It really depends on the negotiations that are underway at the moment. A purse bid has been called for March the 19th in Mexico City, so they've got basically 5 weeks to negotiate a deal. See, the thing is, though, with this, in the previous comment section of that video, there was maybe 20, I want to say, ish, somewhere around there. It might have been 24, might have been a bit more. Comments to the effect that, you know, it's great that this fight is getting made because then Dillian Whyte, if he wins, he'll be the mandatory. He can stop a third fight between Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder happening. He'll be the mandatory challenger who will be made to face the winner of that fight, and that he was going to be the mandatory. The mandatory situation goes away with this fight. There is no mandatory. No mandatory. What's happened in effect? The WBC needed to deal with the mandatory situation because it hadn't given Breazeale that title shot. So this is the way to do it, by giving him an interim title shot. So the mandatory status disappears entirely. There is no mandatory, and the WBC is unlikely to call one for some time after this mandatory situation is all squared away. The squaring away of it is this Whyte and Breazeale fight. Wherever it happens, wherever it goes, you know, whoever wins, they are the interim champion and nothing more. There is no guarantee they will fight the winner between Wilder and Fury anytime soon, unless it is so ordered. But just wanted to clear that up. There is no mandatory on the line here. The WBC is not upholding anything. It's effectively cleaning up its own mess. Remember, it made Dominic Breazeale the mandatory in murky circumstances. Dillian Whyte was the #1 contender. Dominic Breazeale fought Eric Molina in a final eliminator, or what was upgraded to a final eliminator. And then obviously Dillian Whyte all of us found out months later after the fact, Dominic Breazeale was in fact the mandatory challenger, who Deontay Wilder said, yeah, I'm not really interested in fighting you. I'm going to make you wait. I'm going to have a voluntary. And that voluntary turned into Tyson Fury, which is turning into a rematch. So this is the WBC tidying up its own mess effectively. But what it's also doing is clipping the ticket on the way through. An interim world title, that means more sanctioning fees for the WBC. So it might have sort of cocked up a bit here, but it's going to, you know, benefit financially from its actions and what it's going to do here. Anyway, drop a comment, loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe, follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.